Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Sam Lisenco, the production designer whose new project is the Apple TV Plus limited series, Extrapolations. Sam, you're known for some incredible movies, like I was just saying here before we started recording, including like Uncut Gems and Francis Ha and Good Time, all these beloved movies, certainly by me. And this is a TV show, great show, but I guess like why, what was it about this show maybe that you kind of like were like, yeah, I want to do a TV show, like come and work on it?
I don't know if you recall the crippling pandemic that shut us all inside for several years.
Certainly.
Because
Yeah.
I had these like visceral muscle memories of the early on in pandemic having to scrub produce. Do you remember that?
Oh, sure.
There was that viral video, and also watching Contagion like 6 times, and being simultaneously horrified and also overjoyed that it was streaming right at that moment. But when I heard who the showrunner was on this, obviously I jumped at the opportunity. He is such like an immaculate screenwriter, and apparently a Nostradamus style wizard of prediction that it seemed like sort of a no-brainer opportunity, not just to collaborate with somebody who I respected in that capacity, but also to start to challenge my conceptions of where we're headed based on how things have been going.
Yeah. I mean, like, and especially we're talking here on Friday, June 9th. I don't know if you're on the East Coast, but here we just had, because of the wildfires, an incredible toxic air for 2 or 3 days.
I am in New York, and I'm down by the water, and the Manhattan skyline disappeared for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
It was gnarly.
It actually felt like Extrapolations. Like I was like looking at it, I was like, yes, this is actually what it looked like on the show. It seems like very timely, certainly with the show. And like you said, like Scott's ability to future cast, I guess, in kind of almost a scary fashion. I find it fascinating.
It's fun. It's funny because because it's an anthology, I didn't do the entirety of the
Right.
series as designer. I came in and did a couple, and I had sort of inherited this hanging episode that they were getting close to beginning the prep period on, but I hadn't engaged with the project yet. And when I became available, I inherited the script that was about reduced air quality in San Francisco, and the entirety of this episode took place in this apartment. And there had been prior to my tenure a massive amount of conversations about what we would see outside of the windows. What does San Francisco skyline look like a generation from now? And I came in and I was like, it's just orange. I just want orange out the window. You can't see anything. And it was, secretly a bit of a cost saving measure because we don't have to conceptualize the skyline. But I said, oh, it's the air quality is so poor that everything should just have this horrible pall over it. And then inevitably, friends and family started texting me photos of the New York skyline, going, you're not that far off the mark. Yeah.
It is pretty nuts. It's like
it's horrible.
It's like very very traumatizing. I guess you mentioned like you came in. I think you did 4, I believe, right? 4 of the episodes.
Yes.
So I guess like one of the things I love about the show, just the whole series, I felt was like it presents this vision. It's like a very realistic future, I guess, right? Like it's not like hoverboards and flying cars necessarily, even though there are like huge technological advancements, but also like very like felt very real, right? Like it felt like, oh, like you mentioned, like that the apartment episode, like everything in there felt like real, like it just was like a regular apartment, right? And then there are obviously like these incredible technology things. So I guess like as a production designer, like overall in the episodes you worked on, and like you said, I know you came in kind of you were not in the first episode, but just in general, like how did you kind of approach that like balance of going really big on like tech and like future stuff, but also just like, oh, it just looks like could be like an apartment that someone's had for like 30 years basically?
Sure. I was not the first in terms of the creative parties involved in the show to sort of expound the ethos behind what I'm about to say, but my interpretation when I read it was and I'm sort of paraphrasing a half remembered TED talk from YouTube from many years ago. But I remember there was this gentleman who was talking about how in the woods, a Swiss Army knife is the best possible tool you can have, but in your kitchen, it's the worst tool. because it's not specialized in any particular activity. And sort of, I sort of conceptualize this idea that the future, as much as we want it to be this hyper minimalist perfection of space and environment, in actuality, it's an amalgam of everything that's ever come before in a hoarder's nightmare of crap that has amassed over time. And these critical adaptations, they're not Swiss Army knives. They're the new thing that makes that thing better. And when you start to layer these things together, and then on top of that, also assume that people's personal tastes ebb and flow generationally, all of a sudden you realize, like, oh no, our grandchildren will probably collect the same stupid mid-century furniture that we stole from our grandparents, and all of a sudden now you have these layers of practical realism that have suffocated each other over yet another populace just generating plastic and farting out food scraps, you know.
Right. Do you have, like, I guess with you're doing this too, and again, like I said, like you've done like these really great indie movies, I would say, for lack of a term, right? Like Uncut Gems, like I said, in Francis Ha and Good Time. This show, obviously, I'm imagining there's certainly more visual effects, probably, right? Because it's obviously
Yeah.
So like, how did that impact what you were doing? And also, like, again, like I mean, it's very seamless to me. Like I said, like all this stuff felt like so like real, right? Like tactile and real, and like I guess like how did that impact like your work as a production designer? I guess.
One would hope. I feel like if there's any, and I don't think this is a disservice to wizards who do VFX, because I think that they understand the confines with which they're working as well. So I don't mean to drag them down, but I would like to assume that anybody who's making stuff that has VFX engagement would innately, or at least initially, treat VFX like it's a scalpel. You're not going to want to carve the entirety of a turkey with it, but for particular thing, it can be incredibly effective and much more surgical than anything else. And I think if that's your innate attitude in terms of the approach, it becomes a bit more of a safety net. And so for me, it's always like, how much of this can be based in the language of the real, just because the real is going to be easier to communicate. And then from there, you can figure out how and when you have to deviate from those things. So it's not like a rebellious indie thing of me to be like, no, fuck VFX, we're going to do this in camera. But it's more just like, okay, I know what this room looks like in life. But if it has to have a glass ceiling and float in outer space, what would that mean for the implications of what this room would actually be? And if you start from that place, I think what winds up happening is you're in a better place to talk to VFX artists about where it needs to go, especially since a lot of the times production designers are less engaged in post-production and don't really have as active a voice in the room anyway. So I think you want to lay in as much of the groundwork as you can, not just for the purposes of the production, but also to help make their jobs easier as well.
Right. When you came in for this, like, what were your first conversations, I guess, with Scott, like, about like about the approach and like those early? So I think you did both 2059s, right? Like Face of God and Nightbirds. So I guess, like, how did you kind of like, what were those conversations like?
It wasn't that dissimilar from what I had just mentioned of sort of this assumption that like the future becomes more chaotic and more layered as opposed to less layered. But I think we got a little bit deeper on the concepts that like it wants to be less layered. It wants to appear more minimalist and more utopian. But in actuality, it's much more cacophonous. Even the non-aesthetic variables in the storytelling start to harp on that. Governmental interests towards limiting carbon emissions based on numbers as outlined by whom, and these concepts of like there are disparate voices that all have economies behind their rationale is inherently not Star Trek. It's not this utopian future where they've gotten rid of money. And I think that when his brilliance in that regard is his ability to navigate those disparate voices internally and figure out what everyone would be thinking in these scenarios, because it is wholly more complicated than I think anybody could potentially even begin to give it credit for.
Right. The other thing I think he does so well is like just like you said, like everything feels like it's very based in like research. I mean, the show is called Extrapolations, so I'm not like making like a grand statement here, but I'm like, it does feel like it's based on like a lot of like real, everything feels like very realistic and obviously like extrapolated out. Again, I'm so sorry for this, but like, you know what I mean? Like, and I do think that is one of the things he's so good at as a writer. I guess did that like, and kind of, you kind of mentioned this too, I guess, but like just in general, when you're kind of coming from a base, that kind of, I guess, research base, does that like, how does that impact what you're doing, I guess, as a production designer?
There, it becomes challenging only in that you're researching things that have already occurred, and you are trying to project data points based on your assumptions of human behavior, both in the fictional storytelling and also the aesthetic language of these things. Your baseline assumption is always going to be the point and counterpoint of previous generations. So you wind up looking into, for a particular episode, it's like, well, Deco, it would probably be Deco because these things become inherently cyclical. What becomes a little more complicated, I think, is that we live in an era in which now personal aesthetic choices can be plucked from the trees, because we live in this age of instant access to information. So it's not styles and sensibilities aren't nearly as cyclical as they were a generation ago. Now you want to be some cosplayer who dresses like it's 1985, you're going to be walking down the street next to somebody with a handlebar mustache like it's 1910. And so I think in that regard, like it becomes harder to be predictive when it comes to aesthetic value systems. But the writing was a helpful guide in order to justify the choices we're making along the way. And a little bit of it is like, all right, well, we're not going to get everything right. You can't imagine you will. And even within the confines of the show, various technological elements shift based on where in the world we are taking place, and also the functionality it needs to in order to help propel storylines. So are technological props more flat panel glass elements that you can see through, or are they projection elements, or are they smart devices built into homes that project imagery in the room? And the answer isn't necessarily one or the other, but it becomes like, oh, all of it, everywhere, all the time, because it is inherently a mass market of people trying to problem solve these things along the way.
That's really it. Yeah, and that, it's so awesome to think about. Really, it sounds like I would imagine, like it sounds like you very much enjoy this. For part 2 of 2059 Nightbirds, I guess that's more of a like I not really. It's not like a road trip in the sense, but they're obviously it's a
Sure.
large part of that is like a road trip, I guess. Like, like how did that kind of setting?
It's the genre episode,
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did that kind of impact like what you were going to do?
I think trope and sort of like normative cinematic device is always a crutch that makes the medicine go down easier in any capacity. I mean, there's elements of it throughout the series. Even the inherent sort of casting choices of these people that from storied careers doing other things, all of a sudden when they start to play these people in crisis, you don't question it anymore because you're already lost in the fiction of it. So in that regard, like it sort of makes this easier, because it's like, okay, well, we know what a car looks like, and we know what we think cars will look like. And then we get on the road, it's like, well, you don't question the road anymore, that kind of thing.
Right. And then for that one, like, what was the biggest challenge for you then?
Oh gosh. Realistically, I think honestly, it was more about cultural understanding and sensitivity, more so than anything in the like the practical aesthetics of it. I think there's ample research stuff we could pull to justify the choices we were making in terms of what we were fabricating and building, and but making sure that we were portraying these people as human becomes holier than all of that, and I think that the best way to do that is not to be diminutive at all in the language of the fiction that you're trying to build.
Right. You did 4 episodes, like we said, 4 different directors then as well. Like for you, right? I think, right?
Basically. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Does that, and again, they're all kind of like, obviously, like it's Scott's the creator and stuff, so it all kind of is going to fit into the same aesthetic. But I guess, like, how do you work with, like, yeah, like you said, like you're used to film and stuff, and like that's one filmmaker right here. It's like 4 different maybe voices plus Scott. I guess, how do you kind of like figure that out to make it so, you know, the directors are getting what they need, but the show is also getting what it needs, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Sure. I mean, I always say, and I use this as an example of production design, but I think it's applicable in this scenario too. It's like when you're making anything, television or film, if you kick the ball, it's moving. Even if you kicked it in the wrong direction, at least there is some momentum. And one would hope that there is a team in place to correct course if you're headed towards the wrong goal. And I think that in this regard, not only were we lucky enough to have incredible team members every step of the way, but also I think you're with directors of sort of the TV scope and scale that we were lucky enough to have. You are having fresh players come in with loose limbs, you know, and the subject matter is fucking depressing, you know. So all of a sudden you have this injection of new perspective and storytelling devices coming into a scenario where you're just bummed out because you've been dealing with this for months and months, and it was helpful to re-enliven not just the subject matter, but your sort of want to do each individual story justice. Because it's like, oh well, we did that on the last one, but this director wants to go in this whole direction. Yeah, let's okay. And then the goal becomes more of a bird's eye under Scott to try to make the episodes cohesive while it's still exploring these different storytelling tools, you know.
Yeah. The show is, you right. The show is incredibly, I found it like, it's not, I don't even want to call it depressing. It is just so sad, right? Like, or it's like very emotional.
Yeah, listen, the show is not depressing. Oh, the fiction is depressing.
Right.
And the implications for the worst part about this show is that if it's 10% right, it's gonna be rough. You know,
Yeah.
there's no world where even the smallest amount of this is beneficial for all of us.
No, I at the same time watching it, I was like, I don't know if I would say like, not necessarily hopeful, but I was like, oh, at least somebody's like, it felt like great that somebody's talking about it basically, or you know what I mean? Or like, this is like, that this is being presented and that people can see this and be like, oh, and it's not really like a preachy in its like message. I think it is just very clear eyed in that. And I found that like really affecting. And I thought that was
yes,
like,
it is. It is absolutely helpful for one's sense of perceived apathy as things are now. It's like, yeah, okay, other people are pissed about this too, enough that we can have a discourse about it. And you would hope that, you know, it actualizes change. But if nothing else, I've learned quite a bit about my own level of expectation for how bad things could be, and you know, it affects my daily choices to a certain extent.
Certainly, I think so as well. Do you have like, I guess like, again, did you have like a favorite, or I mean, what was your like favorite moment or something that you did on this that you were like, oh wow, that was like great, I'm really glad we pulled this off?
I mean, building India in New York was quite a trick. That to me, the execution of that and the speed with which everyone brought it together and everybody really cared about making that set work. That for me was a big you know, pat on the back moment for me in the art department in particular. But in a general sense, it was less tangible. It was more about the fact that even as a crew, even as a storytelling group, to share that sadness about the subject matter on a daily basis. That's kind of what I look back most fondly about having had that shared experience.
For building India in New York, how did you even approach, like, where'd you even start on that, I guess?
Like, first thing is you need some space.
Yes,
first thing is you start to call municipal facilities and say, where is there some sandy dirt with no buildings in the background? And then you bring people out and say, look, India. And then they say, you can't fucking build here. Look at this ground. It's too sandy. It's too soft. There's nothing here. It's going to take forever to get the trucks out here. And then Apple says, well, no, we're going to do it. And they say, okay, let's do it. You know, that was step one. And then it was just a ton of research and pulling vernacular architectural elements from photographs where we were like, oh, it's without it, spanning too much of the language of Indian residential architecture throughout the entirety of the country, start to pull regional architectural types of things that help connote it without it being a little too over the top, you know?
Right. Where'd you build? Where was it? Where'd you find
It
it?
was out on Long Island, right on the shore, on the southern shore of Long Island. I want to say it was about 30 minutes east of the city.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really does. It does. I was like, I'm in. I believe all of this. Like,
Yeah, it was definitely a fun set. It was fun to hang out there every day. And after being 30 minutes in the car, because it's as far as the eye can see, there's nothing. So you just get out of the car, you're like, oh, wow.
That's amazing. Sam Lisenco, we have to get going, but Extrapolations is a show. You can watch all the episodes on Apple TV Plus. The year 4 episodes are amazing as well. The whole show is great. If you've been hearing us talk about it, hopefully you will like go check it out. Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure.